We're live.
Cool. It's linked up at the top. I've never seen that before.
All right, so I'm Ryan Carver with Wilkes Recovery Revolution, and this is our first segment of Voices of Recovery. We'll be doing one a month. I'll be having different guest speakers to come on and share their recovery journey and a little bit about what they're doing now in their community and things like that. My first guest is going to be Michael Crouch. I'll let him come in and tell you about his journey and what he's doing now down in South Carolina.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Crouch. I am a certified peer recovery support specialist, and of course, also a person in long-term recovery. I have been in recovery from an opioid use disorder and a sedative use disorder since 2013. I haven't met criteria during my last 8 years. What I do today is I'm currently working for Faber Greenbelt, which stands for Faces and Voices of Recovery. And we are a recovery community organization. We have two other centers, one in Anderson County, South Carolina, and one in Oconee County, one in Spartanburg County, South Carolina. So my role is I work in Oconee County under the Oconee County Project, and we are implementing services for people leaving the Oconee County Detention Center, and we will be working with people in the court system. Part of the program I'm involved in will also involve a social worker in the detention center and a counselor that people with mental health conditions and substance use disorders can be diverted to in certain nonviolent situations. This is part of a grant-funded project from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I know that there's other places maybe close to this area, like Lazarus Project, that have the same grant-funded program. This is just like a new journey. The past 2.5 years previous to what I'm doing now is I worked for a outpatient treatment facility in Pickens County, South Carolina, to where I was a peer recovery support specialist there, doing multiple things. I ran peer recovery groups for people participating in their medical program. I did the final phase of an intensive outpatient program, and I also was involved in other aspects of that program. So I've been a peer for about since the summer of 2018. So I haven't actually worked in this field very long. I completed my associates in arts from Tri-County Technical College this summer. I returned to work on my bachelor's degree in human services in just a couple weeks. So my goal is to kind of further my education and continue to work in this field wherever I end up. I don't know where that'll be yet. It just depends. Got to see how that plays out. So that's kind of where I'm at professionally. I'm also a member of Challenges Inc., which is a harm reduction organization in South Carolina. We do syringe services and naloxone distribution. Again, I didn't want to leave that out. But that's kind of who I am professionally. I'm certified through NADAC, and I'm also certified through the Addictions Professionals of South Carolina. And again, that's who I'm in professionally. But so as far as my recovery journey, we can kind of start, where it all began. God created the earth, the seas. No, I'm just kidding. Where it all began for me was I was born in Charleston, West Virginia. My mom had moved up there, and she was in college in West Virginia, and she met my dad, who is from that area. Um, so I was born there. I still have a lot of family there. I still spend a lot of time there. I visit there quite often. And I lived there probably till I was like 3 years old. And my family, we moved to the coast of Virginia. We lived there for a little bit. And when I was 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old, I can't tell you the exact date. I don't really remember. My parents got divorced, and my mom, my brother, and myself moved back to South Carolina to live with my grandparents for a short period of time before we were able to get our own place and that type of stuff. So that's like one of the first memories I have is when the day that my mom and I, my brother left my dad. I didn't really have the awareness or the cognitive ability to understand what was happening. But I do remember that last day we had a U-Haul. We loaded up our stuff and we moved back to South Carolina to where I am today. Still in Oconee County, still in the same area. Still, I actually live in the house that was my grandparents at that time period. So it's really almost like it's full circle. But that was like the first memory. That's like one of the first memories I have, or one of the first impressions in my brain um, that still comes to mind. But what I would say is that my journey, beyond that, was very much affected by that divorce. Um, my mom worked a lot, like probably, my mom would work like 60, 70, even 80 hours. She tried to make our life the best it could. Um, and a lot of it was work. And I didn't have the structure growing up that I would hope my son has moving forward. I don't want it to sound like I'm being critical of my mom, but if I don't bring up the idea that I didn't have, the experience I have without structure, then I'm not accurately telling my story. So, we didn't have supper time at 6 o'clock every day. There wasn't a routine. There wasn't anything in place. I was very much a latchkey kid. I could go and come as I pleased. And what happened, because based on that, was I my attachment needs began to be very anxious. So I didn't, a lot that lack of structure probably contributed tremendously to my feeling not a part of society and not a part of anything, and uncomfortable in my own skin, and the anxiety and that type of stuff, and I definitely don't blame any particular person or what happened, but that affected who I was on my journey moving forward. So as a child, I struggled with ADHD. I had a hard time concentrating. This was the mid 1980s, early 1980s. I didn't develop the ability to. I was never really taught the ability to like express my feelings. So even today, I have a really hard time being vulnerable and saying, I'm sad, I'm happy. I would hold a lot of stuff in as a child. I would I didn't come home and say, so and so picked on me today and it hurt my feelings. That was not who I was. I built walls up to where I didn't, that just wasn't part of the process. I just sucked it up and took it, and whatever happened, happened. And I'd never really developed the ability to express how I was feeling, what was going on, kind of tell people where I was at and that kind of stuff. So, that was definitely another contributive factor to the problematic substance use that came about with me. Um, I tried medication. I was probably, the medication didn't work for me at that time period, the ADHD medication, and I didn't really have the ability to tell people what was going on. But what was really going on was it bothered me because I had that anxiety at that time, and it made me super nervous, and I couldn't really it didn't work for me. I'm not a person that thinks medication is bad. ADHD medication helps a lot of people. It helps a lot of people in recovery. But at that time, I just didn't, it just didn't work for me. And I didn't have the ability to express that it wasn't working for me, that it was making me nervous and that type of stuff. And it's hard on parents because, they want to help their child. And it really, you would, you do it. A person would give a child medication, you know, and not question it a whole lot because you just really, a parent automatically would want to help them, So again, it's not a bad thing. I know that people take ADHD medication all the time that helps them. I just struggled with it. So I developed different mental health conditions. They were huge risk factors. I had anxiety. I had ADHD. I was very impulsive. If you're familiar with ADHD, I have a continuous need to seek stimulation. I'm always looking for something else, something else to feed that need for stimulation. I had poor impulse control. And that type of stuff. And that combined with the age that I first used substances made me very, 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 very high risk for addiction. So at like age 14 or 15 or whatever it was, when I tried cannabis, I had a very high reward payoff. So some people use substances and it doesn't mean a whole lot to them. But for me, when I used substances, when I started using cannabis, it made me, it medicated a lot of the mental health stuff that I was dealing with. And I was like, okay, I'm good to go now. Like, I can be calm. I'm not nervous that much anymore. I feel, it took care of a lot of stuff that was bothering me, and it I was a person that, I don't know. It's hard to explain now because in high school, like I was not motivated. I didn't care. Like, I don't know if it was self-esteem or what it was, but I was perfectly fine being a DC student and barely making it through um, high school. Like today, I make good grades. It's very important to me, probably over important to me, how much that my success matters to the point where the trauma of underachieving and not fulfilling my potential makes me go overboard and try to do too much and try to prove myself to people and that kind of stuff. So I kind of barely, I made it through high school. I was not prepared to go to deal with college and that life. Um, I flunked out, went back, flunked out again. I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't have the motivation or the drive to do it. I was really just doing it because that's what you do when you finish high school. You go to college, and somebody else is paying for it. So whatever, let's do it. But I didn't make it. I didn't feel connected with society. I didn't feel a part of anything really, because growing up, I just didn't. I didn't get connected in anything like sports or student government or some kind of club or something. My future and my purpose I didn't have a whole lot invested in that. So, I just traveled on and ended up where I ended up, which was becoming a person that sold drugs because that made me very important. And I needed cannabis because cannabis medicated a lot of the things that I was dealing with. So if I sold cannabis, I could get cannabis for free and it made me important and people liked me. And I was the guy people had to come to. And even though that I wasn't important in my community, I was important in that underground community, that social set, that subculture. I was super important in that. And it kind of made me feel better about myself in some sense. By selling cannabis, I was introduced to prescription opioids and benzos. And when I found that stuff, like it really medicated the stuff that I was struggling with, and I didn't have to smoke anything and I didn't have to deal with like running it. I didn't have to deal with the complications of, trying to, cannabis did it, but it just didn't do it the way that prescription medication did. And when I say prescription, I wasn't prescribed it. So I was taking it illicitly. but that, like, that stuff really made me feel content, you know. And if you ever think about somebody, you know, that needs that stimulation, maybe you know, the dopamine is, you know, isn't like, doesn't have a good baseline. That's who I was. Like, I needed to be doing something all the time on the go. And like that stuff medicated me, and I was calm and I could concentrate and I could work, and I didn't struggle from the ADHD as much, you know, at all, really. Of course, there was all the side effects to that, but, you know, it did help with that stuff, and it did make me content. You know, it did, like, you know, I didn't have to, you know, I didn't have to deal with feelings. I didn't have to deal with the shame of where I was at in life and not fulfilling my potential, not achieving goals. Um, so that was my thing, you know, throughout my 20s, was do drugs, do more drugs, and hang out with people that did drugs, because that's all I really knew. Now, during this time period, it got a lot worse and a lot worse and a lot worse, because, you know, I eventually lost my license. So there was like 7-8 year period where I walked or had to ask for rides. Um, you know, I, I just, you know, I wouldn't get haircuts when I wanted to. I didn't even care, really. You know, I didn't have clothes I wanted to wear. Like, I lived in a life that would invoke a lot of shame, you know, and I dealt with that by continuing to use, because if I was using, I didn't really have to focus on who I was and who I had become. And I continued to do that for many, many years. Um, I lived with my grandparents a lot during this time period. You know, I would stay gone for several days, come back. You know, I did all the horrible things that addiction leads a person to do, which meaning steal from the people that love me the most, harm people. You know, there's a lot of bad things I did, and I could go into all that, but I'm sure most people understand watching this what that's like, you know. And the people that don't understand what that's like. I care more about you understanding what my recovery is like than the bad things I did during addiction. Um, you know, I lost my grandpa during that time period. I was disconnected from my father, um, you know, my mother, you know, everybody, because I just lived in a world where I used drugs, and everything was based around continuing to use drugs. Um, I could keep a job for a short period of time, never do that, never stick with it, so on and so on and so on. It was really bad. um, I had been in treatment a few times. I had been introduced to some different things. But around 2007, I had some friends that started going to a methadone program. Um, and they seemed to, at least, they seemed to break the cycle of addiction. Um, so I eventually ended up in the methadone program myself. And it was the first time that I was able to stabilize and have some sort of sense of recovery. Um, I was able to go to work every day. I was able to save money. My pattern for the last 8-9 years had been, you get paid on Friday, you spend the whole thing, and then you hustle to do what you need to do to fill in the blanks, because what I got paid didn't cover the cost of drugs for me. So, you know, participating in that methadone program allowed me to stop that cycle. You know, I went back to college. I even finished a few courses. Um, I I was able to get my license back. I hadn't had a license since, in, you know, almost a decade. I think it's like 7-8 years. I'm not sure. So I was able to get my license back. And it was, you know, I did okay. I didn't really engage in recovery. You know, I didn't know what that meant. And this is a good reason why I think it's very important for me to share about recovery publicly and to people that know me, is because I didn't know anybody that ever been in recovery except a guy that was like my dad's age that went to AA, and he was like, I did not relate to him at all. And, you know, I didn't know it, and I didn't have connection with him, you know. There's a big gap between getting to a meeting or whatever place that you find recovery and right here, because, you know, for back then anyway, like it's different now. There's a lot more stuff, but back then, you know, there was AA, and that was about it. And I don't know. I just didn't end up there. I struggled, you know, I struggled with benzos after that. I started taking, you know, I struggled with alcohol, benzos for 3 or 4 more years. Um, but I never returned back to that place prior to what I was like before the methadone program. I actually tapered off during this time period when I was taking benzos. I actually tapered off the methadone. And then somewhere along the line in that time period, I went into detox and came off the benzos, alcohol, and other things. And then I left that detox, and I really had no idea what I was going to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to use drugs anymore. Um, I actually quit my job, which people didn't understand in my life. It was January 2013. I got a tax return check, which was really good. It wasn't much, but it was enough to where um, I didn't need to work immediately. Um, I had a lot of recovery capital. If people are familiar with recovery capital, I still had my driver's license. I had a vehicle I could drive. It wasn't mine. It was my grandmother's. I lived with my grandmother. I had a safe environment. You know, there's 3 bedrooms. It's a big place. We had direct TV. You know, we had food. We had all the things that a lot of people don't have. So I was very blessed to have all that stuff and just chill and hang and figure out what life was going to be like while I was feeling super uncomfortable, because withdrawals last a good month. If anybody knows what that's like, it's pretty rough. So I need, you know, having this place here to chill was very helpful. Um, my mom was very motivated to help me. Um, you know, she would call and check on me. My brother actually called the hotline for Narcotics Anonymous during that time period, and people from there called me and asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting, and I did. And I say all of that because the family involvement in recovery is very important, and it's very easy to shame family and say you're enabling them and this and that, you know, and maybe that can happen. But it's also very important because it made all the difference in the world for me to have that support from my family before I was engaged in my own recovery, you know, and to have a safe place and to have transportation and have food to eat and um, have social connections that could help me get a job when I was ready to get, you know, when that time came. Um, so I went to a meeting. It was very uncomfortable. Um, I went to another meeting, and, you know, I just kept continuing to go back on my own, and I was able to find people to hang out with in recovery. And that's what the biggest thing that meetings did for me was I had people that we could go do things and hang out and have fun. And I had that connection immediately because I didn't feel connected to society. And society doesn't normally embrace people that are a few days into recovery, you know. And I feel sad in some aspects. It was the greatest thing that happened to me, but I feel sad that the people have to go to these little groups to do something that society could do, is just bring people in and love them and accept them and help them rebuild their lives. I hope the future that society can do more of that, and meetings could just be part of it. You know, I feel like that it's almost like you can go to this one little place over here with these 15 people because the rest of everybody else is not going to accept you the way they do. But, you know, it was awesome for me. I got really super involved, probably to a place that was too much. You know, it was like my new religion, you know, my new everything. You know, it's not like that today, but you know, it was a great experience. I traveled to conventions. I did a lot of stuff. I hung out with people. I went different places. I met people from all over. Um, it was awesome. Like, it was really awesome, you know. But what I can tell you is, because, well, I rewind. About 8 months into recovery, I started working at the local hospital in the dietary department. So when I'm telling you all this fun stuff I'm doing in recovery on the weekends and at weeknights, I'm not telling nobody about it. So the people that I work with, now I worked at the hospital for nearly 5 years before, 4 or 5 years before I do what I do now. So there's this huge, great, amazing thing in my life that I'm doing on the weekends. Um, but nobody at work knows about it unless they look on Facebook and happen to find out, because I'm still not openly talking about being in recovery, because I'm carrying the shame and stigma of active addiction. And I know what people think about people that use drugs at work. So what are they going to think about me when I tell them what I used to be like? And that's a real thing. I really lived a double life for the first 5 years of my recovery. I didn't talk about it unless you happened to find out, or I just got the courage to tell you. So it was like, it was really bad. I mean, it's really sad in some aspects, that's the way it was. But it also made me who I am today, and it helped me to understand what stigma is. And stigma is not just the way we talk about people that use drugs. It's the way people feel in recovery when they're afraid to tell you. People quit smoking all the time, and nobody's afraid. People, I hadn't smoked in however many years, and nobody's afraid to tell anybody that. Or I lost 50 pounds, and nobody's afraid to tell that. But there are millions of people that walk around that are extremely afraid, that somebody's going to find out that they're in recovery. So that was my life. I guess at 2000, I'm trying to get my dates right. So yeah, 2017, I knew I wanted to do more than what I was doing. I knew that I didn't want to work where I was at forever. It was great, don't get me wrong. Like, I had benefits, I had insurance, I had paid time off, I had all these things that I never had before until recovery, but I knew I wanted more. So I went to the local technical college and took a couple placement tests. And before I left the building, I was enrolled in college for the fourth time, and started in the fall of 2017. It was one of the greatest things I've done in my recovery, because during that time period, I came to believe that I could do more than just an associate degree, that I could do a bachelor's degree, that I could have a career. It's very hard. There's been so many times I thought I was going to flunk out, fail. I wouldn't make it. I tried to quit, but I didn't. And I stuck through it. I got my associate's degree in July 2020. And when I say that, I have been in and out of college since 1997, when I graduated high school. But in recovery, I was finally able to really dig in and get it done and complete and accomplish that. I met some cool people. I was able to go on a trip to Boston for one of my classes for like 19 days. We explored a lot of different things. And it was awesome. I've been to Washington, D.C. during that time in college there, and it just really exposed me to a different world. Because again, in college, I'm also not telling people I'm in recovery, and I'm afraid that they're going to find out, and it's, I actually did write a paper and tell a few people. So I actually did start to come out a little bit in some of my writings, but for the most part, those people didn't know I was in recovery. But in the summer, in I guess like April 2018, the person asked me if I was interested in taking a job as a peer support specialist, a peer recovery support specialist at that local outpatient facility. And I went and applied and got the job. And so now there is no more hiding you're in recovery. So this person that had been secretly in recovery for the past 5.5 years, now you have to tell people, and you have to figure out how to tell people, and you have to, and you don't, and it was very uncomfortable for me to start talking about my recovery to everybody, because you can't, I mean, it's even more comfortable if I don't know how to talk about it. Like, and they asked me, what do you do? I'm a peer recovery support specialist. Well, what is that? and I don't know how to explain it in a way that makes me feel proud of who I am. I didn't have a clue. Today I can do that. So I was thrust out of the closet immediately, and I had to start talking about it, telling people and that kind of stuff. But it was awesome. It's thrust me into the person that I can be, that I am today, meaning like I do presentations at conferences, big conferences. I was asked to speak at NADAC, but it got canceled because of COVID. But I'm able to present. I'm able to work with other people, like as far as training people. I'm able to do a lot of cool stuff. I'm able to self-educate. I'm able to help people, which is really, really important to me. And I'm able to do it in a way that allows me to use my lived experience and no longer feel ashamed of who I am, but be proud of who I am. My beliefs have changed a lot. I'm more inclusive. My recovery pathway was very rigid, and it needs to be done this way, and it needs to be said this way, and this is the best way, and you can't do this and that. And that's changed a lot for me now. I'm open to just about anything you could possibly think of that helps people. I think that I personally think that we have a society that's trying to punish their way out of the epidemic that we're in right now. And I think our laws and the war on drugs is probably the biggest contributor to all of that. As long as people are as long as we're trying to treat something we call an illness with a punitive approach, we're going to continue to have the same problems. But life is good for me. I met a person that I am now married to in 2018. We've gotten married. My son was born on July 1st, 2020. I know last year was a hard year for a lot of people. But I got married and had a son, and it hasn't, and I don't know, like, it's not hard for me to sit at home by myself because I've spent time, isolated anyway from the world for so many years. So I was almost conditioned to be able to do it. I've rebuilt relationships with my family. The biggest thing I do for my recovery today is I see a therapist once or twice a month, and I get to work on those underlying issues that contributed so much to my substance use, meaning trauma, meaning ADHD. I get to work on my emotional regulation, and that's kind of where I'm at 8 years into recovery, is trying to just continuously work on my mental health, because there's also a lot of stigma and shame around that. I mean, the first time I'm a helping professional, which has all kinds of reasons to be seeing a therapist, just to kind of have somebody to bounce off my frustrations with. But the first time that I told somebody I was going to see a therapist, they said, "What's wrong?" Like, and that's the stigma. Like, nothing's wrong. What's right is I'm getting into a solution to be able to be okay, because I'm also a trauma survivor, and when I started working in the helping profession, I really got to see the curtain behind what's really going on, as far as how we treat people with substance use disorder as a society. And I'm looking around and I'm like, what? There's 16 beds for detox in South Carolina for people on Medicaid or people that don't have insurance. Like, and there's no, and there's one or two places that you had to wait months and months to get in for treatment, but they'll take you to jail today, and so I don't know. It was traumatizing for me to see the realities, because at the same time, I'm also like thinking people need tough love and they need to feel pain and that kind of stuff to let go. But really, people are struggling because they're disconnected from society, and shamed and treated like garbage on a daily basis. So it was hard. It was hard for me to see that. It awoke a lot of trauma. But a year and a half into therapy, I'm doing really well. I have coping skills. I'm aware of my trauma. I can use CBT skills to self-soothe. I can manage my ADHD. I can definitely manage my substance use disorders, from which which also is why I say I'm in recovery. So, I'm in a good place. I do believe recovery is a lifelong journey. Does it mean I need to go to 17 meetings a week like I did? No, of course not, because I feel like I have gotten well, and this is a disease that we can get well from. I'm not going to return to use if I don't go to a meeting for the next month. I voluntarily go to meetings, and I think that's the difference. Is I voluntarily do recovery. I'm not at a place where if I don't, I'm not at the same place where I am when I left detox, where if I don't hurry up and figure this out, I'm going to die. Addiction is deadly and people die, but it's important also to understand that there are tens of millions of people in long-term recovery, and a lot of those don't ever return to use after 5 years. I think it's important. I think it's important to tell people that and promote the positive. If I don't talk about recovery being awesome, which it is, then why would anybody want to come to it? Life is hard, but life is hard for everybody, and it is hard when life addiction is hard during that time period of figuring out what life is going to be like once I stop using, or struggling to still want to use, but knowing life could be different. But for the most part, I deal with the same thing that other humans deal with. So it's really important for people to understand that recovery is possible. Recovery is the reality of millions of people, and recovery benefits everybody. My mom, my dad, everybody in my life. I have awesome relationships with people all throughout my family that I didn't see for a very long period of time. I go to West Virginia a good bit and visit with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my stepbrothers. I have new friends. I have a whole new life that was only possible through recovery, and is only possible now based on the work I've been able to do. So I think that's where I can wrap it up, but I really appreciate this. It was an honor to be asked, and a privilege to be here. So thank you.
So somebody's got a question, and they was asking, they would love to know in which ways an employer or coworker could help support someone in recovery to help them feel safe.
To help to do what? To
help them feel safe, help support a coworker or employer, an employer or coworker, how they could support somebody that was in recovery to help them feel safe and sharing their experience.
Just to create an environment where it's recovery friendly, basically. If it just depends. I think it's important, for one thing. So let me say this: I think it's important to be recovery friendly and to embrace it and say that you appreciate recovery. But I also think it's important not to treat people differently because they're in recovery. So like if you're vulnerable with me about anything, whether you're being vulnerable that you're in recovery, or you're being vulnerable with me that you have had some other experience, it's important for me not to make you feel like I feel sorry for you. Like, oh, that's, you don't want to say, oh, that's terrible. Like if they share, or you poor thing. Like, people don't need sympathy. They just want to, they want to be treated like they are equals. And I think that's what's important. So just to embrace the person, normalize the recovery, and don't make people feel like they're a victim, or you're going to give them sympathy, or you feel sorry for them. Just embrace it the same way you would if they told you they struggle with cigarettes for 40 years and they don't smoke cigarettes anymore. You know, a person wouldn't have a response of sympathy. So it's kind of the same thing. Just treat them as an equal, but make it a safe place for people to feel like they're not like a leper or something.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on and being my first guest. It was really awesome getting to hear your story, which I've heard some of it several times. We've been friends for a while. For the people on Facebook, I think somebody should have put the link to our YouTube channel in the comments. You can go on there and find any of our videos that we'll be doing, any of our lives, they'll be posted there. Also, if you haven't liked our page, Wilkes Recovery Revolution, please like it so you can get updates about what's going on around here. And I appreciate it, Michael, and I'll be in touch. And if anybody else in recovery wants to reach out to me that would like to be a guest and share their story, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll try to get that set up.
Yep.
Have a good one, buddy.
All right. See you later.
Thanks, everybody.